Hi guys! So last week we went over the knit stitch. I hope you all found that video to be a little bit helpful in getting you started with your knitting projects. Today we are going to cover the purl stitch, and the purl stitch is pretty much the opposite of the knit stitch. So if you remember from last week with the knit stitch, we kept our working yarn towards the back of our needle, and all of our stitches that we worked created a bump at the back of our work. Today with the purl stitch, we're going to have our working yarn to the front of our needle, and we're going to be creating bumps in the front of our work. So I've already gone ahead and cast on and purled a couple of rows here just to get myself started. I'm going to go over how I like to hold my yarn for you guys again. If you find that you like my way of holding the yarn, go for it. Like I said, there's plenty of different ways out there in which you can hold your yarn. If you found a different one that works for you, awesome, keep using it. So I want to make sure that I grab my working yarn here and not my tail. When you first get started, they do kind of lay pretty close together, and you could accidentally pick up your tail and start working with it. So just in the first couple of rows of your project, just double check and make sure that you are using the working yarn. You can tell the working yarn is going to be the one coming out of that last stitch on your needle. So if you pull on it, you can see I'm actually tightening up that stitch on my needle. Okay, so I know I have my working yarn, and that tail is going to be coming out of the very beginning of your project. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have my working yarn here. So I'm going to kind of secure my yarn in my hand so I can have some control over it as I work with it. So I'm going to kind of lay that working yarn over the palm of my hand, wrap it around behind, bring it back up in front, and then I take my index finger and go underneath. This way I can now kind of wrap my left hand around my needle, and I have some control over my work as well as my working yarn here. All right, and remember, live stitches, left hand needle, right hand needle is going to be empty, and we're going to create our new stitches on that. Okay, so if you'll notice, I'm holding my yarn a little bit differently. I have it towards the front. When we were knitting, we actually had this to the back here, and I was set up like so. Get that tail out of there. With purling, we keep that in front here, all right? And we always come underneath of our needle to bring that working yarn over. We never bring it over the top of the needle, all right? So, working yarn in front of my work. I want to make sure that I have my stitches closer to the edge of the needle here. And here we go. I'm going to take my right hand needle. And here we have our first stitch. We've got the right side of our first stitch and the left side of our first stitch. I want to come in. Make sure you keep your working yarn to the front here. I'm going to come in from the right hand side through that stitch on the needle and come out on the left hand side of the needle. And I'm going to keep this right hand needle in front of my left hand needle. So you can see I'm actually kind of making an X with them. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is take my working yarn and wrap it all the way around. I like to take my thumb, cap that right hand needle so I can kind of guide it through and keep the yarn on the needle, which I did not do successfully here. Don't worry, I'll show you guys again. And then we're going to take that old stitch on our left hand needle here, and we're just going to slide it off. Give it a little tug for some tension. And now I'm kind of situated with my working yarn towards the back here, but I don't want it to be there. I want it in front. So what I'm going to do is just bring it over, bring it through, and have it back in front. So everything's in front of the left-hand needle. Again, I'm going to take my right-hand needle, come in from the right, through that stitch, out on the left, and it stays in front. Everything is in front of the left-hand needle. All right, working yarn, I'm going to wrap it all the way around. I cap it with my thumb here, and I'm just going to guide it through the stitch on my left-hand needle, creating a new stitch here on my right-hand needle, and slide that old stitch off. Little tug for tension. Okay, let's bring these closer to the edge here. Okay, I now bring my working yarn back in front. Right hand needle in from the right, out on the left. Create your X with the right hand needle in front. Wrap your working yarn around. Cap that needle, guide it through, and slide your old stitch off the left hand needle. Bring it forward, and here we go. In from the right, out on the left. There's my X. Working yarn is in front. We're going to wrap that working yarn, cap your right hand needle, guide that stitch through, and then slide your old stitch off the left hand needle. So with the purl stitch here, it can be a little tricky getting that yarn through, keeping it on the needle. I know when I was first learning, I struggled to pull that yarn through and keep it on my right hand needle as I created my stitch. So that's why I kind of like to keep this little cap on the needle as I push that right hand needle through my old stitch on the left hand needle, so I can make sure that it comes out with that new stitch on top here, or on the needle. Okay, so here we go again. Right hand needle in from the right, out on the left, in front of the left hand needle, working yarn and right hand needle. Wrap your working yarn around, cap your needle, slide it through. New stitch on my right hand needle, slide that old stitch off the left. In from the right, out on the left, wrap the working yarn, cap it, pull it through, off the needle. Okay, we're going to finish out these last couple of stitches here. And now we have successfully created a whole new row of stitches on our right hand needle. And you can see there are my bumps hugged up nice and close in the front of my work. All right, so remember we said left hand needle is where our live stitches live. So we're going to take this right hand needle with all of our new stitches on it. We flip it. And there we go, my new left hand needle with all of my live stitches. And I can start again, grabbing that working yarn at the front of my work and set up for a new row of purling. So with the purl stitch, if we were to continue to purl and purl and purl, we're going to create garter stitch, just like we would if we were to knit and knit and knit every single row. This probably looks very familiar because it looks just like the knit stitch. It's just the reverse. Instead of keeping those bumps to the back on every single row, we now keep them to the front on every single row. So there you have it. That is the purl stitch. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop me a line here. You can also find me on Instagram at Lazy Dog Knits, on Facebook at Lazy Dog Knits, and my website, www.lazydognits.com. Next week, we are going to go over some really fun stuff. We're actually going to combine the knit stitch and the purl stitch and go over some basic stitch patterns. So check back in next week, and in the meantime, keep working on your purl stitch. Thanks. Bye.